Sterilizing, buying time, killing people next in line. Lower classes, social slime, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. Caesar shit, force of air. Fuck them back, it's only for their war. They shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids, no one makes countries. Lie to your face, fight and die. Cause God will give. Selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line. Lower classes, social side, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. See their shit, force of air. Fuck them back, it's only fair. They bomb, they shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids, no one leaves countries. Lie to your face, fight and die, cause God forgives. Yeah. Coming back around again.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Ron Stevens. This is Rock the Boat right here on UCY.TV, my favorite little internet network. And I hope it's growing. I really hope it's growing. There's some really good hosts on here now, and people that have their minds right, people who are not conned by right, left, people who understand the game that's being played out against us in the West in particular, but the entire world. And we've got to stop turning a blind eye to what's going on. Now, I was supposed to go, and I wish I could have went to Calgary to be part of the election process out there. And I want to thank the folks who offered to fly me out there and home, and also the kind lady that offered to put me up in her house in Calgary. But I'm not going to Calgary. After speaking with the candidate that I had planned on trying to help win the election, and listening to his so-called platform. And then I got a call from the campaign manager the other day and had to write this candidate off because they don't have a hope in hell of winning. But the whole point of this election is to get the Muslim mayor vacated out of there. It's a two-term Muslim mayor in the city of Calgary. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, I went up to get a coffee this morning, and the lady working at the counter also lived in Calgary, of which I did. And, I told her about the election and that, and that trying to vacate this Muslim mayor. And she was freaked out. What do you mean a Muslim mayor in Calgary? Exactly. And she went, that's effed. Well, of course it is. Now, I haven't lived in Calgary since the 70s, but, I lived in Edmonton, Calgary, and even did a stint up in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, but I've worked north of Edmonton and south of Calgary. Worked as a reporter photographer in Calgary, also driving D8 Cats when they're building the new airport. So I got to meet basically all sides of Calgary. I mean, when I was a reporter, it was for an oil magazine, and hung out with oilmen from Texas, Oklahoma, all over Hell's Half Acre when we would cover these conferences in Calgary. And I also work with Native people, and I also work with in the construction industry. I worked for the city of Calgary for a very short period of time, and that just showed me how badly cities are run anywhere. I remember asking my supervisor, like, what the hell are we doing here? And I was just a young guy, but I mean, it's not hard to see things, folks, but I asked the supervisor, what the hell are we doing? We're putting in storm sewers. And I go, like, we got twice too many men, twice too much equipment, and we're taking twice too much time to do the job. And he took me aside and he said, well, we got to blow the budget. Why do you got to blow the budget? Why don't you try coming in under budget? Well, we don't blow the budget, then we can't look for more money. And so you the taxpayer, are being bled from every freaking direction. Okay, you are the surety of the debt. That's what your last name indicates. Your last name is the surety name, which means you're obligated to pay the debt, regardless of how much money these clowns blow out the window. And they can blow it on the most ridiculous things going. And what do they care? You're on the hook for it, not them. You're the responsible party, not them. You're the liable party, not them. So, you go and you vote, and most people don't have a clue what's even going on, yet they go and vote. My idea is if you don't know what's going on, you don't get to vote. That makes you dangerous. If you don't have a clue what's going on, then you're dangerous. And to give you the opportunity to vote for something you don't even know what's going on makes you really dangerous. And this is how we find ourselves in the position we find ourselves in today. We're just an ignorant lot. We are the chattel. We are the cattle. We're the goy. These are Christian-founded nations, and that irritates the hell out of me as well, because when you think about it, Christianity came out of Rome, and if you look at the Roman flag, you will see the same laurel wreath as is around the UN logos. Only the Roman flag had, inside the laurel wreath, had all of the lands that Rome controlled. And now the UN logo has the entire world in it. And that's the plan. So Christianity coming out of Rome is not a good thing. Once the Reformation got going, once Luther got to Rome and witnessed the sickness of Rome, and he did mention little naked boys jumping on birthday cakes, and the priests have been diddling with these little boys ever since. But Rome was satanic. The Pope was not the vicar of Christ. Okay, the Pope is Satan's bum boy. And when Luther got to Rome, and he was a very devout Catholic, and when he got to Rome and witnessed the sickness of Rome and how they were bleeding the people, and that people couldn't get to their Creator without going through the church, and every time the church needed more money, they made a new sin tax. And the only way you could get rid of your sin was to go and give some money to a priest. And Luther looked at this and went, this is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. So he pinned his problems on the church door. Gutenberg printed it, and the people rose up and kicked Rome square in the teeth. And for the longest time, no Roman Catholic could hold power in the West because people were on to their nastiness. So I don't even like the word Christian, because it's the Christian. If the Christian faith came out of Rome, which it did, and it's satanic, which it is, then you don't want to be a Christian. You want to be a Protestant. And the word Protestant comes from the protesters, protesting what was going on in Rome. Breaking free from that overlord of the people. The problem is, Rome has risen again. And we see in our schools the same garbage that was going on in Rome. Okay, we see, it's the transgenderism, the hermaphrodites, the twisting of reality, and it's back. And I had this gentleman when we were fighting windmills a long time ago, and he hung out with theologians and that, and he would send me books, and I read the books, and talking to him, I said, all these books say is that all roads lead to Rome. He goes, exactly. So it's time to kick Rome in the teeth again. When I say Rome, I'm talking about the UN, I'm talking about the Jewish faction that's shoving all these immigrants into our countries, that are telling these little girls and boys that they're not the gender they think they are. This is sickness, this is wickedness, and it's over the top. And we need to put our foot down on this. We need Reformation II. They had Vatican II, and we need Reformation II. We need to crush this nonsense. Now, they did it before, and we can do it again. I had a gentleman on last night, Larry Heather, who's running for the mayor position in Calgary, and he doesn't have a hope in hell of winning. And we were talking last night on the show, and then I had another lady come in from Calgary. And I don't know where that came up at, but Judeo-Christian came up, which Larry aspires to being. And then all hell broke loose because I can't put up with his nonsense. Judeo-Christian is as ludicrous as legal and law. Judaism and Christianity, well, it depends what Christianity you're talking about, I guess. If he's talking about Christianity out of Rome, then I guess he's bang on. But most Christians don't aspire to that. So most Christians don't follow Rome. They follow the reformers. But when you're using the word Christian, it gets confusing. And that's the whole point, is confusion and deception. And there's a little note in the Bible there somewhere that says, take heed no man deceive you. Well, we're under mass deception right now. And a lot of people can't see. A lot of people don't know. And then if you can't see and you don't know, then yeah, you're a target to be deceived. And that is the vast majority of the population. And, he got on about, we need the corporation, we need to be run by a corporation, and, Faye was talking about the lockdown at City Hall in Calgary, and he's on side for the high security, and the only reason you have high security is that these people know what they're doing is absolutely evil, and they're scared. If they weren't afraid and they weren't evil, then we wouldn't need to lock down our public forums. So, you know, I was hoping, because Larry has some stuff there that the other politicians can't say, but this degenerated into sorry, Larry, don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. You've totally exposed yourself. And so now we still have this problem of how we're going to get this mayor out of Calgary. And then people say, well, you're in Ontario. What do you give a damn about a mayor in Calgary for? Well, the simple fact is the man's a Muslim. He's an Ismaili Muslim, and I call those the suits. Okay, and the Ismaili Muslims are under the leadership of the Aga Khan, of which Pierre Trudeau hung out with, which Justin Trudeau hangs out with the Aga Khan funds the Trudeau Foundation. And if you put in Aga Khan foundations and see what this foundation is involved in, you will not be a happy camper. If you can see and you know. Otherwise, you'll say, oh, isn't that wonderful? Look at the Aga Khans putting all this money here and there, and you know, and bike trails and transgenderism and So get your head together, people. So, and that's all tied over to the Baha'i faith. Now, we're always hammered here about Allah and that. Now, the Baha'is believe in Allah, and the Baha'i believe in Sharia. But when you study it, it seems that, you know, we had Jesus, Muhammad, and then the Baha'i guy. And the Baha'i head office is in where? Israel. So we need to cleanse our lands of this nonsense. And that is why I get flack, you know, like from people, what's wrong with Muslims? They're just people too. I'm not talking about any individual. I'm talking about the plan. Okay? This is this nonsense of Islamophobia. I'm not afraid of Muslims. I'm pissed off at the whole situation. And it has to stop. And I see, and I could be wrong, but I see that if we can get this Muslim out of Calgary, it will send a message, hopefully, across the country. Now, we don't want Muslims in our legislatures. We don't want them in our local councils. Because once they get a foothold in our local councils, which is the plan, by the way, boys and girls, then they are in control of writing law. And the only law that Muslims understand or adhere to is Sharia. Because the idea is to wipe the history clean in the West. That's why the Confederate flag and the statues are coming down. You know, we're watching revisionist history right in front of our eyes. It's like the chalkboard in the school has the history written on the chalkboard, and there's the Independence War in the States, the War of Independence, and there's you know, the statues and the great men of different eras, right? Which are all players anyways, but it doesn't matter. And it's like the teacher goes to the chalkboard and picks up the eraser and just starts wiping the board clean. You know, you were a boy and you were a girl and you grew up to be a man and you grew up to be a woman and you grew up to guard the house, so to speak, from intruders and deceivers and such. And wiping the board clean. And now, well, you were born a boy, but you could be a girl. You know, tomorrow in class we're going to bring in some drag queens so you show you how fun it is to dress up differently. We're going to tell you that there's too many of you on the planet. And we'll just wipe the board clean, and then we'll redraw everything. And then we'll blame the parents and the grandparents for everything bad that ever happened in the world, which is complete fallacy, because your grandparents and your parents are just trying to do the best they could for their families. But oh, they wreck the planet. So they divide the families. And the happy little transgender teacher just stands at the chalkboard and rewrites history to the new children who have no sense of history because they're so young. Their heads are empty. You can fill an empty head with anything you want. I said long time ago, and I stand behind this. You can take pretty much anybody, and if you isolate them, and that's what the schools are doing, they're isolating the children. But you can take somebody, you can isolate them, and before the isolation process begins, you can put 2 pieces of paper in front of their face. You can say, what color is this? And the kid will say it's white. And it doesn't have to be a kid, because people have succumbed to this nonsense of climate change and this needed immigration and all the rest of this nonsense. But the media isolates the message. It's the only message they hear, so the weak succumb. And even those who are fighting this eventually, for the most part, succumb because they don't want to be centered out. They don't want to be ostracized because they actually can see and they actually know, but they're overcome by the masses. But you can take that man or woman or child, and you can set them down and you say, what color is that piece of paper? And they'll say white, and you'll say, that's correct. And you put them, and you put the other piece of paper down, and you say, what color is that piece of paper? And they'll say black, and you'll say, that's correct. You isolate them, and you just constantly work on them, and you change their mindsets, and eventually, you will say to the man, woman, boy, or girl, you say, what color is that piece of paper? And it's white, but you've convinced them it's black. And you show them a black piece of paper, and they'll tell you it's white. And that's what isolation of the mind does. And that's what they've done. They've isolated the minds. People say, well, my mind isn't isolated. Of course it is. The only thing that you're feeding off of is what's being fed into your brain. And you don't question what's being fed into your brain. And even if you do question it, you're outnumbered. And therefore, it's not to your advantage to question it. It's easier just to fold in to the flock. And eventually you will just come to accept it. And that's what's happened in our nations in the West. You know, when I saw that story of a kid getting thrown out of school because he had a Confederate belt buckle on, that tells you pretty much everything. Now, if he'd had a Muslim belt buckle or a belt buckle with a turban on it or something, he probably would have been praised in the school. If he had a transgendered belt buckle on, oh, isn't that wonderful? Right? So the reality is being changed. It's being changed more rapidly every single day. So why I'm so adamant about getting this Muslim mayor out of Calgary is to hopefully send a message across the nation that we don't have to put up with this nonsense. Now, the way the poll's sitting now in Calgary, the gentleman who was a 3-term councillor who decided to run for mayor, who could have been the mayor the new mayor if he had played his cards right, but his people, I think, have thrown him in the ditch on purpose. So we have now a new poll cast the mayoral race as a two-horse contest with lawyer Bill Smith leading over incumbent Naheed Ninsi. Now, Naheed being the Muslim. Now, the problem with this two-horse race, Bill Smith is a lawyer. Bill Smith was the president of the PC Party of Alberta. And so Bill will do exactly as Naheed was doing, and that's push the international agenda, because all parties are part of this. It was the PC Party that signed us on to Agenda 21. This kills me, you know. This really irritates the hell out of me. You know, stateside or Canada side, it's the same garbage. Oh, these freaking liberal leftists. Well, hey, it was George Bush that signed you on to Agenda 21. It was Brian Mulroney that signed us on to Agenda 21, and they're both conservatives. I mean, how can people miss this nonsense? So regardless of which one of these guys gets in, nothing's going to change. I mean, the city manager, known as the CAO, the Chief Accounting Officer, all of these Chief Accounting Officers / city managers are trained specifically to implement the international agendas into your communities without you realizing it. It's not the mayors that set the agenda for council, it's the city manager / CAO. And nobody voted his ass in. Okay? He's the one or she's the one running the show. The council is just the front. In other words, the business is being done in the back room. Kind of like the mafioso, right? You put up a front business, but the real business is being done in the background. And people still, for this day, believe that these clowns represent them. No elected official in this country or the United States has ever represented the people. They represent the corporation, and the corporation is a business. And where do corporations come from? Out of Rome. And what's the plan? To destroy what your Creator created. And that's what they're doing. You have been designated as animals or cattle, goy. You do the work and they feed off of you. And they throw you just enough crumbs so that you don't revolt. I think we're getting to the end of the Crumbville. I mean, they are taking your crumbs till you don't have any crumbs left. They believe that they have got you so stupefied and so dumbed down and so weak mentally, spiritually, and of the spine that you can't rise up anymore. And I intend to live long enough to prove them wrong. We've got to clean the slate. We have to reclaim our proper status, and our status is of men and women of law, not human beings ruled by a legal system. And until we do that, we're just cattle. And cattle are animals. You know, I would like the people were firing out these memes all over the place when the guy from Nestle said, you know, water isn't a human right. And it pissed a whole bunch of people off. But if you think about it logically, he's absolutely correct. It's not a human right. A human is an animal by definition. And where does an animal have a right to anything? That's when they send the boys and girls off to these banker wars and hundreds of thousands of them get slaughtered. You never, ever, ever see any leader showing any remorse for what they've done. You're just animals. It's like a dog fight. Okay? It's like putting the dogs in the ring and letting them chew each other up while you're betting on who's going to win. That's your position in this planet. This is your position in this world. You need to understand that. Because till you understand that, we're just going to keep going south. You know, it's like dropping little goldfish into the toilet and flushing and watch them go around and around and around and around until they disappear. You're being driven into the cities for a purpose, because you're manageable in the cities. We got you locked down in the cities. We can make you real sick in the cities. With all this immigration, they can drop a bomb, a medical bomb in there, or a viral bomb in there, and they can blame it on whatever immigrant group and wash their hands of it. And then they'll turn around and say, oh, we're trying to save you. They're putting you into cities. You know, the Jews talk about Auschwitz, man. That ain't squat compared to what they got planned for you in the cities. They make no bones about it. They want mass depopulation. They want at least 2/3 of the population of this planet to vanish. Now, once they got you in the cities, and they got you out of your private vehicles, and your only transportation becomes their transportation, the only food you can get on your hands on is their food. And they control your medical, and they can control your education, or they do. You're screwed. You know, and it just always reminds me, this always reminds me of 1984, and of all that book. The one thing that really stood out to me was that scene when whatever his name was and his girlfriend were up above that little shop where they used to meet out of the sight of the cameras. And she looks at Winston, that's his name, looks at Winston and says, you know, like, let's just get out of here. And Winston said, go where? And she goes, anywhere. And Winston looks back at her and says, everywhere is the same. It's a global lockdown. And I don't care where you are, you're being locked down. And you're being set up to be exterminated. No different than taking a bunch of cattle and putting them in a pen and putting them down. No different. You know, and the Jews look at you as cattle. So regardless if we have this Muslim in power or Bill the lawyer, okay, they're the same people. They work for the same people. They're pushing the same agendas. Nothing's going to change, regardless of which one of these clowns gets in. But I think this is set up. I will be surprised if Bill Smith, the lawyer, wins this. This looks to me like another one of these setups. There's 2 weeks to go in the election. And miraculously, at the last moment, Bill will do something really stupid or something, and Naheed will just bolt to the front. Because it's all constructed. It's all constructed. So they want the Muslim in there, but they may sit at their playing board and say, well, you know what? There's a lot of people not too happy here. Why don't we put Bill in for a term, and then we'll either bring the Naheed back or we'll bring somebody else in. I mean, this is not, your vote is not, it's all constructed, folks. It's all fiction. It's all art. It's all a play. Now, if you do get Naheed out of there, or Nensi out of there, a lot of people in Calgary will go, yeah, for a couple of months, and go, what the hell's going on? This guy's doing the same as the other guy. Exactly. It's about moving the international program forward. And that's all it's about. Now, the guy I was going to go out there and work with, Andrew Chabot, a longtime city councilor, 3-term councilor, says here he has only 7% of support in a telephone poll. And polls are ridiculous to start, because I could go and I could phone. It depends where I phone. Okay? If I phone one part of the city, Chabot might have 60% of the vote. If I vote into the immigrant area, he may have 7% of the vote. So these polls, you know, in a telephone poll, well, who'd you call? Where'd you call? All right? So these polls really don't mean anything, but what they're trying to do is make sure Chabot don't get in. So they move him out, and I told them, you know, we had a couple of conversations. I told them, what the hell do you think you're doing? Are you trying to lose the election? Because the only time you get in the paper is when you agree with Nenshi. And that's not, my friend, how you go about winning an election. First elected in 2010, in a surprise victory, Nenshi enjoyed sky-high approval ratings during his first few years in office and was even named the best mayor in the world in 2014. Now, the only way you get called the best mayor in the world is called the world's mayors or city mayors. You can look that up. It's all through the Rockefeller United Nations. All these different tax-exempt foundations. Is if you're pushing the agenda. Okay, that's it. Now, the Hazel McKellion, the long-term mayor, she was the mayor of frickin' Mississauga, Ontario, good God, for 10 centuries maybe. She was the mayor of Mississauga from the 70s into the 2000s, And she was, I think she was runner-up world mayor back, I don't know, early 2000s. And why did that happen? Because she's pushing the agenda. And I remember seeing a video of her talking about when they bring this infill in, this high density, right, housing. And she was telling some of the councilors, don't ever use the word high density, right? Use words like infill and stuff like that. Because she didn't want to tip off to the people living in Mississauga. You know, it's too easy now with Google to look stuff up. So you try to hide the go words kind of thing. So this is what's going on, and it is international, and I'm seeing more and more articles about, is Canada going to be the first post-national state? Well, again, we have a lawyer, Bill Smith, who was the president of the Alberta PC Association Party, whatever. Then who did we have before Trudeau? We had Stephen Harper, PC Prime Minister, who stood at that damn podium in 2010, the same year that Nenshi took the mayorship of Calgary, standing at the podium in Toronto at the G20 meeting, and he stated quite specifically, this, meaning the G20 meeting, is a loss of national sovereignty. Some people don't like it, but it's a simple reality. Now, nowhere in this country was what he said at that G20 meeting, and I was at a media scrum. See, it didn't go anywhere. It wasn't on a TV. It wasn't in a newspaper. It was nowhere. This is a loss of national sovereignty. So in 2017 now, we're getting all this news about, is Canada the first post-national state? Well, what is the agenda? The end of nation states. Okay? The end of nation states. And that's the plan. How do you end a nation state? You remove its history. You open its borders. You put it under international law. Now, it'll still say, USA, and it'll still say Canada on the map. But this is like global colonialization, okay? We're all under the power of the international government and the international law. And that means that they have complete and total control over all of our resources. And they decide how we live, how we eat, how we're educated, where we live. That's not what our forefathers came here for. Our forefathers came here to get out from underneath of that tyranny. And they did their best to offer us freedom. They ran lawyers out of villages and towns when they showed up. They would not let a Catholic hold power. Now, I believe Brian Mulroney is a Catholic. And he's a PC. or conservative. They signed us on to Agenda 21. Now, progressive conservative, see, that's like the Judeo-Christian. That's like legal and law. It doesn't work. A progressive conservative, a conservative and a progressive are two totally different entities. Opposite ends of the scale. But the word progressive is in front of the word conservative, so you know that these people are progressives or internationalists. Moving us to where we don't want to end up at. And we gotta smarten up. I can't believe, my nephews live I forget what the name of the town is, but not that far north of Edmonton, maybe a couple hours. And my one nephew's running, I don't know what, steam trucks or some kind of truck. Maybe he's cleaning tanks or whatever. He's got these big trucks. And he says, like the Muslims basically own the trucking out in Alberta now, right? Well, how'd that happen? How'd that happen? Not by mistake. Most definitely not by mistake. And I don't know why people don't stand up to this nonsense. I really have no idea. Now, I think I listened to a bit of Shawley's show this morning, and he must have been talking about this, terrorism in Edmonton, Alberta. And Edmonton police investigate acts of terrorism after officers stabbed and pedestrians run down. 5 people were injured. 1 person is in custody. A man who stabbed a police officer with a knife and deliberately plowed into pedestrians on Edmonton's busiest downtown strip is being investigated for acts of terrorism. Police said at a news conference Sunday. 30-year-old man is in custody following a high-speed chase just before midnight through the streets filled with bar patrons and football fans. The chase ended only after a white U-Haul van the man was driving struck 4 pedestrians and flipped on its side. We believe the individual acted alone. Edmonton Police Chief, said early Sunday, adding that the police would investigate the possible involvement of others. The police chief confirmed that a black ISIS flag was seized from a car where the police officer was attacked. The officer was not critically injured. The condition of the 4 pedestrians is not known. Based on evidence at the scene of the actions of the suspect, it was determined that these incidents are being investigated as an act of terrorism. The first attack happened around 8:15 Saturday near Commonwealth Stadium when an officer was working traffic control for a CFL game. Police released video of suspect car ramming police officer. The chief said the officer was standing behind the barricade when a Chevrolet Malibu crashed into it, hit the officer and him flying 4.5 meters into the air. The male believed to be 30 then jumped out of his vehicle and viciously attacked the Edmonton Police Service member with a knife. A struggle then ensued, during which the male suspect stabbed the officer several times before fleeing the scene on foot. An officer is taken to hospital. His injury is not critical. Yada, yada, yada. The U-Haul immediately sped off toward downtown Edmonton, where streets were filled with people. As bystanders watched, the van barreled down Jasper Avenue with up to 20 police cars following. The police cars just kept coming, said Jaylene Ellard, who was out with a friend on the crisp fall evening. Another witness said the vehicle was driving between 80 kilometers, driving up to 80 kilometers in a 50 kilometer an hour zone. The high-speed chase which is hardly a high-speed chase. 80 kilometers is 50 miles an hour, which really doesn't become a high-speed chase. But, hey, this is the media. The high-speed chase should never have, in a million years, have happened downtown. Who was in parking lot was a group of friends where the vehicle sped past. When the witnesses said police cars began to block streets that connect to Jasper Avenue, the U-Haul eventually doubled back and drove the opposite way down Jasper. Throughout the chase, the U-Haul truck deliberately attempted to hit pedestrians in crosswalks and alleys in the two areas along Jasper Avenue. Now, this kills me because I lived in Edmonton. And I remember Jasper Avenue well. And, Saturday night or weekend night, downtown was full of people, and anybody that first went to Edmonton, they were always amazed because we could buy off-sale beer. So you could party after the bars closed because you could buy a case of beer right in the bar, which was pretty slick for us young Ontarians. Worked out pretty good. But, it was amazing the amount of booze that got drank downtown Edmonton when I was a young guy. There was very few fights. Oh, you'd see the odd fight, but it wasn't a killer fight. Back in the day, people, even though you got in a fight, you still tended to respect each other. Once a guy was down, he was down, and that was that. You didn't continue to viciously harm him. It was like the old uncle thing. Once you've won the fight, you've won the fight. There's no need to continue to hurt anybody. So Jasper Avenue was alive on the weekends, and it was a fun place. And now we have police chases down Jasper chasing a U-Haul driven by a guy who sounds like was the guy that ran over a cop earlier, and now is trying to run over pedestrians. Now that isn't normal. Now I don't see anything in here yet as to who was arrested. We do see there was a mention of an ISIS flag or an ISIS flag, but I don't see any indication here anyways of what this guy's nationality was or anything. The horrific events last night in downtown Edmonton have left us shocked and angry. Notley said in a statement. Now, this is the Premier of Rachel Notley is the Premier of Alberta, who, like the rest of these nut bar so-called leaders, puts her headscarf on to show respect for Islam. But she's shocked. It's left us shocked at the indiscriminate cruelty and angry. I mean, this is CBC, of course, so it should really say left us shocked at the indiscriminate cruelty and anger that someone might target their hatred at places where we gather with our families and friends. Hatred has no place in Alberta. It's not who we are. We are in this together, and together we are stronger than any form of hate. Well, they brought the hate in. Your politicians brought the hate in. This two-sided speaking out of both sides of your mouth at the same time, like stick an apple in it or something. Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale issued a statement as well, saying the national terrorism threat level for Canada remains at a medium, where it stood since the fall of 2014. Police are scheduled to hold another news conference at 3 p.m. Sunday, and police are working with the RCMP's Integration National Security Enforcement teams on the investigations. So it really doesn't say, but if you have someone with an ISIS flag and somebody's trying to run people down and run over cops, this is your Islamic movement, you see, because in Islam, they recognize nothing but the state of Islam. And the state of Islam does not recognize any other religion, nor does it recognize any other law but their own. So when you have the premier and that saying, you know, we won't put up with hate. Well, you brought the hate in, you silly cow. This is your politicians for you. They are the liars and the deceivers, and we have to wrap our heads around that. And this is retarded. This whole thing has got off the deep end, and the students don't get it. Edmontonians urged to wear orange in honor of residential school survivors. Now, we're talking about a very, very, very long time ago. And of course, these students don't have a clue what's going on, but the teachers, you know, I don't think they teach the kids anything in school. I know they took cursive writing out of the schools, but I don't think they teach anything in the schools except social nonsense. You know, if they're not teaching them how to be transgendered or gay, they're teaching them that, well, you should wear an orange T-shirt because of the indigenous school, the indigenous residential school survivors. Now, the kids don't have a clue, right? They're just being told stuff. And they're always celebrating something. You know, the UN has a day for everything now. They may extend the calendar because I think they've run out of places to have a particular celebration of a particular thing. So it's all just constant, unrelenting propaganda, which, you know, you could say to the kid, why are you wearing an orange shirt? Well, because we are honoring the residential school survivors. Do you know anything about that? Well, not really, but it's fun, you know. I don't know if I mentioned this before or not, but we were over at Michael Schmidt's farm Friday night, I guess. And he has two young boys, and when I was talking to the young boys, you know, they know how to handle knives and whatnot. They live on a farm. I think they're 8 and 10 years old, his two youngest. And, you know, they have no, you know, he was showing me, he's got a flip knife, and he was showing me how well this thing works, and 3 ways that he can make it open and whatnot. And I was telling him about, oh, geez, I said, that's pretty cool. I says, you know, schools change, I says, because when we went to school, we used to play this or even in the schoolyard. And the game we used to play was with knives. And, you know, I think you had to try to keep it within 6 inches or a foot of your foot. So you would stand there with your feet together, and whoever goes first would throw the knife and stick it into the ground beside your foot. And you couldn't be too far out or it didn't count. But so you go between, you know, your foot and out, I think it was out around, you couldn't go further than a foot. And the idea is not to put the knife through the guy's foot, but so that you would end up stretching your opponent out. You know, you'd throw it on one side, one on the other side the next time until you got your friends stretched out to the point where they couldn't stand up anymore. And first one go down or go, damn, that hurts. I'm not talking about a knife stab, but the crotch hurts. Going out, spread out too far. First one to say give up basically or fall down lost. And this was a game we played. We never thought nothing of it. We had respect for each other's feet, and it made you good at throwing a knife. We did have in high school, we had a gun range. Nobody locked the door to the gun range. There was no security at the gun range. The guns weren't locked up in the gun range. The bolts weren't taken out of the guns and put somewhere else kind of stuff, and the ammunition was not locked up, but we were encouraged to become good marksmen. So, that was grade 9, and there was nobody freaking out about anything. Today, it's a totally different thing. Now, when I was talking to these kids, live on the farm, would go to the country school, which is outside of the school system, where there's no concrete, there's no pavement at the school. It's just beautiful grass and trees and the buildings. And I'm talking to the kids about how you can't wrestle at school, right? Yeah. We can't punch each other in the face, but we can wrestle, right? We do it all the time. And I said, you realize if you went to a normal school, a public school, you couldn't do that? And they go, why not? I said, because they have a no touching policy and you can't touch. Well, he said, these guys are 8 and 10 years old. What are we talking about? We can't touch. I said, it makes playing tag very difficult. Well, how do you play tag if you can't touch? He says, can you it really, really, he says, one young guy come up to me, he got within, an eighth of an inch of me. Can we go this close and then say you're it? I said, I don't know. Maybe you have to text each other that you're it. And these two young guys were absolutely, it was like I was talking some fictional nonsense to them because they're not involved in any of that. They're going to a school that's outside the public school system, which one would look at the actions of the school as normal. But when you tell these kids that have never been exposed to the public school system, and you tell them what's going on, like you say, I say, you can't do a cartwheel in North Bay schools now, and they're spreading that. Why? We do cartwheels all the time. It's fun. Exactly. But if you go to public school, you can't do it. And they're just scratching their heads going, what the hell are you talking about? But in the public school now, that's all been normalized. Jimmy, touch me. How pathetic have we become? How pathetic are the parents to allow this to go on? How pathetic it is that the parents allow their children to go to public school. Windsor, Ontario, I read an article, 600 and some kids between the ages of, the ages of 6 and 9 in Windsor, Ontario, are being threatened with being kicked out of the school or suspended for up to 20 days because their vaccines are not up to standards, and that they put a notification out to the parents that these 600 kids, little wee kids, haven't had enough needles shoved in them yet, and they'll be suspended for 20 days, which puts a fear in the parents because the parents are going, well, geez, I'm working. We're both working. What am I supposed to do with these kids? I can't take 20 days off of school, so they run the kids in and get them needled, and then everything is kosher again. Now, over at this little school in the countryside, they're not shoving needles in these kids' arms. They feed them good food. They get to go outside and play in the dirt. They get to cut themselves. They get to heal up. They get to build their immune system like it's supposed to be built, not weakened by these vaccines so that those children are either sterile or sickly and will be even more dependent on the government as they kill them at an earlier age. So I don't know how parents even, I have no idea how parents send their kids to school and turn on the TV and see about this transgenderism and this pronoun nonsense and this Islamophobia nonsense and allow their kids to stay in school. The only answer I have to do that is that the parents were in the public school prior to their kids going in the public school, and they were dumbed down enough that they can't think. You know, it's just sick. Anyways, Christopher. I always want to call you Christopher Robin. So we got you? Says we got you.
You got me.
How do
You
I
got
get
me. You got me with that freaking knife in public school, remember?
Did you used to do that?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was one of the dumbest things I ever did. We used to do it the sand or the grass, because when you're on the pavement, you know, the knives would get dull real quick, eh?
It's a little tough, yeah.
Yeah.
but that was a normal game. You know, like
it was. But it was like the stupidest thing. We had 22 caliber bullets, right? We had a case of them one time.
Yeah.
And we took them at night. We were about 13. And we put one down and slam a rock on it.
Oh, okay.
Boom!
We used to throw them in the fire.
Nobody ever thought about where that bullet might go.
Well, we didn't either, because we used to throw them in the fire pit, right? And and then go. You know, it wasn't really bright. Nobody got hurt, but it probably wasn't that bright. But you know, it's what kids do. Kids experiment, and kids, you know, they push it a little bit. But you know, all of these things, like I told Oliver, little 8-year-old guy that was showing me how he could flip the knife, right? And it had a good sized blade on it. And you know, I says, if they would hang you for this, right? Like if you had a plastic knife in the public school to butter your bun, they would hang you for it. You know, but I'm sure he's going to try that game now with his brother. And you know, come on, let's do this, right? I mean, what it did was it helped your coordination, right? Because you don't want to really stuff it in your friend's foot, right?
Yeah.
So,
your friend's going to have good coordination if you miss.
Right, because you're going to kick his ass, right? Like you stuffed a knife in my foot. I'm not going to be a happy camper. But no, I mean, it was good. And even the fight, like I was talking about the fights, you know, there would be fights, but when it was obvious that whoever was down was not getting up or had no fight left in them, it was over. You know, you didn't have 5 or 6 guys kicking the snot out of somebody on the ground, right? Even though there was fights, there was a certain code, yeah. And that all's gone now, right? So now we got some idiot in a U-Haul running around on Jasper Avenue running people over. You know, well,
Ollie Akbar, or whatever the hell that is.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought I heard Charlie say something about that's what the guy was yelling or something, but I didn't find nothing in that particular article about it.
I don't know.
But
I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, it's not a normal Canadian act, right? You know, there's a cop behind a barricade. I'm going to run his ass over and get out and stab him.
Yeah, punch him in the mouth.
Not even the most pissed off Canadian don't operate that way. So you can figure that this is part and parcel. And then you got Notley saying, you know, we won't put up with hate. Well, wait a minute. You hate us, right? Or you wouldn't have brought these people in here, and you wouldn't be wearing a headscarf like a freaking Muslim if you were against hate. You know, it's just really sickening. So, anyways, I don't know what to do here. I mean, I was talking to Faye, who called into the show last night, and apparently got this show going. Well, I don't know. But now that I look at it, I guess it was semi-positive. Now, I don't know who Mer Bailey is, or I don't even know if I said that right in the chat. You know who I'm talking about?
Mer Bailey, yeah, she's a good girl.
Yeah, I don't know where she's from or anything, but
no, she's like Hal.
Oh,
she doesn't go on Fagbook. She doesn't go on.
Yeah, okay. But she really, and I looked in the chat there last night after the show was over in UCY chat, even the show was over in Revolution Radio, and she really enjoyed the last half of that show last night. Large.
Well, Ron, can I describe it to you how that show went?
Sure, I'm good.
From my angle. That first hour, I think you lost 90% of your listeners.
Well, we were talking.
And then, as the second hour went on, it started to pick up a bit. It's like reading a bad book. You know, that your friend tells you got to read this book, and you read it because your friend told you.
Right.
And then the whole book just kills you to get through it.
Yeah.
But then the ending, you go, holy fuck, that was a good book. That's what happened last night.
Well, I really didn't want to go there, but like the girl at the Max this morning when I get my coffee, I was telling her about, I said, this she was freaked out because she lived in Edmonton. She goes, "What do you mean they got a Muslim mayor? How the hell could you possibly have a Muslim mayor in Calgary? That's really effed, right?" So she's pissed off now that she knows they got a Muslim mayor. But when I told her about this counselor who, when he brought up Judeo-Christian, I said, and I mean that's opposite ends of the scale. And she goes, exactly. Like, you can't be that, right? It doesn't exist. And so she was. So I'd heard him say that once in a debate or something, right? And I thought, oh, I don't want to go there. I just want to talk about, how we're going to get this Muslim out of there and stuff, right? And then I got to thank Faye because she called in and I think she was what? Okay. So it's not what I wanted, but I kind of got pissed off a little bit because this guy is, he's saying, when he said that we have to lock down the city hall, right? You go, okay, we got a problem, So we have 10 candidates running for the mayor of Calgary. There isn't one of them, not one of them, that is on the side of the people. Not one of them. And that's, I guess, hopefully, an expression of what's going on around the rest of the country and in America. And that's why I keep telling people, if you don't engage and you're expecting something to change and it doesn't change, I mean, how long does this have to go on before you understand that you have to get engaged in it?
I think some confusion lies in the fact that, okay, you've got, how many in Calgary? 8, 10?
10 candidates.
Okay, and there's not one worthy of
none of them.
Okay. So then people are saying, well, why vote? So I think you got to clarify the confusion in that, because people are thinking, you're like, I don't vote. You know that. I haven't voted for fucking 12 years now.
Well, I haven't voted either.
However,
I've run in elections.
It's because there's nobody there to vote for.
But that's the whole point. There's 36 million of us, and there's these small little groups of people who run, who other people vote for. Okay, so they're voting, yes, but they're voting for people who have very specific goals, which is to crush us and run us out of our houses and run us out of our vehicles and so on and so forth. So how hard is it for some good people? And, you know, notorious is the number of people that vote in municipal elections. When I was talking to Faye last night, and I said, like, what was the turnout for the Calgary vote? Excuse me. And she thought it was around 36. Excuse me, please. She thought it was around 36%. So only 36% of the population went out to vote, and the other.
There's your new leader.
There's your new leader, and you wonder. And then they come, but then the people in the city or the town complain about these guys who are putting their taxes up and adding all kinds of user fees and yada yada yada, and locking them down. They're complaining, but they don't have a right to complain because they never were engaged, right? So we're just a bunch of whiners and complainers, and people constantly say that what's the point of voting in a municipal election because they don't, you know, what are they, right? You know, well, they are where all your power is. Helen? Helen wants to come in? Should we bring Helen in?
Let's bring Helen in.
Helen called from Calgary on the telephone, and I think I'm scared of Helen. You know, here's an ex-school teacher in her 60s who gets it, and, well, let me see if we can find, I think I have Helen's phone number in here somewhere. See if we can find Helen. And if we can find Helen, there's Helen. You ready for this?
Nope.
You better put on your chaps and your spurs and get a fast horse.
Get a knife.
Because Helen from Calgary is going to ride on into town here. This will be interesting. So I love Helen, man. I love Faye. And, you know, it's like I keep saying, where's the men? You know, the women are trying to run the weasels and the foxes out of the house, but
Hello.
the guys don't.
That scares me.
Hello, Helen. How are you, my dear?
I'm good. Do I scare you, Chris?
Hey, Helen.
I'm not scary. I really know how to have fun and to enjoy and to communicate and to feel free and have some freedom and some love in this environment. But anyway, I must say, definitely, as far as the mayoralty goes, there's no one. I'm really sickened. I was for Chabot, as probably some people know, but I had about 3 people that at least showed some life or passion, but the rest didn't. Now, as far as school board trustee, I went to a meeting yesterday.
Oh, good,
We'll be going to a meeting this afternoon put on by, again, another special interest group. The other interest group yesterday, they would like to tell you that they're not a special interest group, but they're a community center.
Yes, well,
and they are definitely a special interest group. The questions were all done, prepared in advance.
Always.
I mentioned it right at the beginning, and you'll never guess there's 13 of them. So I know that the satanic people out there, they like this numerology stuff.
Yeah.
And all the questions were pre-written down. Then there was a question from somebody who wanted a question. That person was from the Alberta Health Department, and I stood up because they didn't want. I was told to sit down a couple of times, or to be quiet, and I stood up and I said, there's people here in the audience that would like to have address some questions to the possible candidates. And why are you taking somebody that couldn't come when we're here and we would like to address the questions? Well, you can do it after all the questions. They'll hang around after and answer your questions. Mm-hmm. So they didn't want any open...
Not in the public forum, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, they've been doing that for years.
So and then I said, there's no friggin' way that you can get through 13 questions without any public input or questions whatsoever in the time frame that we'd have to be there till 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I tried to, narrow the time down so that we, the people, could ask, the real men and women could ask them questions.
Right.
But they wouldn't allow that.
No.
Then which I thought, another thing that I thought was strange, Mary Martin was there, and she is a Roman Catholic trustee, well connected in the system, within the structure, and I go to Catholic systems meetings as well on occasion, not many, but I've been, and they're even more Delphied than Calgary Public, and so I think that there's a real tight noose on Calgary Public to get as tight as the Calgary Catholic School Board.
When I noticed when I ran in the elections, and I've been watching this for years and years and years, is that it used to be, right, you would step up to the mic and ask a question, and the candidates would answer the question to the best of their ability. And then over the years, just like you said, when I ran in the provincial election in 2007, there was a couple of spots that the public were allowed to ask questions. But for most of the public forum things and most of the all-candidate meetings, they were all preconceived questions, and they were conceived in such a manner that the candidates could just give their little soundbite. Right? There was no discussion on any of this stuff. And it was completely shut down, right? It's the same as you go to a council now. You can go there as a delegation and you can present your questions or whatever, or your thought processes, but the councils now are not allowed to respond to you.
That's right.
Right? So you go there and they just sit there like deer in the headlights, right? Because they won't engage with you. Thank you for your time. Next. Right?
Yeah, we've heard you, if they hear, yeah. And what I thought was very strange, I ran 3 times for a school board trustee in Calgary, and then I gave up. But this was the first time I've ever had a Catholic on the public board. Yes, she was in the area, but for decades, there's been Catholic people, trustees in the wards that I was, that I was a candidate in, and never did a Roman Catholic.
School boards.
They're 2 separate boards, but she was there. She was the kingpin, so that people on the left and the right of her, because they lacked some experience, that she could sort of direct the conversation.
Mm.
So that, and then
she's the boss lady, eh?
Yeah, she was the gatekeeper. And then she had a shirt on, and she had a shirt on that was for the residential schools. And there was the orange shirt, that's right. And then Sarah Peden, who is university connected and supported by Carol Bassinet, who I ran against. I said something about the the fluoride water that they were drinking, and she went and she touched my arm and she said, "Don't interrupt her. Don't say anything." Yeah. So anyway, and what I'm always amazed at is that many times you will find out in their conversations, like I did yesterday, at least 2, if not more than 2, they have issues with their children. They're either autistic or they're labeled as something. But these people don't realize that the very system that they're promoting are the very politicians and the systems that are creating this label.
Right. Right.
So they don't want to get to the root of the problem at all. They're just short-sighted. They have no interest in their children. They have no interest in the next generation.
No, they have interest only in their egos, right? Like these people get stroked, right? These are the weak people that are running the show. They're the weak people. They're the people that are easily stroked. Their egos are stroked. They're made feel important, right? And they're better than the general public and just follow our system, right? And that's what they do. They're the weakest of the weak.
That's right. And now the two people that definitely, yes, there is nobody who that is supporting the real men and women of Calgary in this election. But there are two candidates for school board trustee in wards 12 and 14. One is Carla Obuck, O-B-U-A-C-K, and I knew about her and I wanted to watch her, and then Karen Draper. So those are the two. The rest are all part of the system, part of either the NDP or the part of the union or part of the university or part of the PCs.
Right.
And,
the churches, the unions, the police, the firemen, the universities are all involved in this.
Yeah. So
right?
That's,
and so, you know, they present these people, oh, so-and-so's head of this and so-and-so's head of that or whatever, and, oh, that's wonderful. No, it's not wonderful. It's terrible.
And then tonight, there's another one put on it. I don't know if I'm going to go to it, but it's with the unions. And I like going because I always observe so much, you know, and I'm the type of person that I have to feel it. I have to experience. I have to watch it. I have to
and then people
observe
don't you're engaged in it, right? People don't engage, right? And that's why we're in the position we are. People don't engage. I mean, when I was asked to come and speak in London, Ontario, and this group got a hold of me, and they actually wanted the fluoride out of London, and you know, they said, well, we'll just book you at the Unifor Hall, and I said, well, the Unifor, they're not going to let me speak there. Why not? All the speakers speak there. Well, they're not going to let me speak there, right? And Unifor is the union, right?
Right.
And so they called me back, and they said, we wanted to book you in there, and they said, no. Not going to happen, right? Yeah. Because they don't want anybody lifting the lid off their box, type of thing, right? So it's very difficult. But what you just said about the school boards is the same as the municipal halls, and that is that, you know, we could take the school boards if we had enough people running for the school boards. But the general public refuses to engage. For some reason, and I talk to the people all the time, and they don't think they have the capacity. They think they have to be special, or they have to have this superb education or something to run for a school board or a municipal hall or a municipal council. And that's farcical.
Well, I called two people, and I've invited them to a couple of events, and all of them, both these gentlemen, they both understand the broken system. They understand the global structure of it. But do you think they would come to a meeting or to be involved or put their name in the hat or come up to the plate and run? No.
That's what I'm saying.
They're self-centered.
The men are so weak. It is absolutely sickening. I can't believe the men are as weak as they are, right? You guys are supposed to be guarding the house. That's your job. Okay? And now you've got the ladies trying to chase the foxes and the weasels out of the house. And you don't want to get engaged in it. I don't understand that. I mean, that is your duty as a man, is to guard your home, right?
And the duty of a mother is to protect their children. And when they're playing the games that I see these women playing, I'm just as disgusted with them.
Yeah.
I'm more than disgusted because they know they're playing the game.
Yeah. And Like when counselors here in town see me, they just get scared as hell, and they run. I don't have to say boo; they just take off like scared rabbits. And like Faye was talking about last night about the way the city hall is locked down in Calgary, and it's locked down because they're afraid. They know what they're doing is absolutely wrong, but they're doing it anyways, and they're scared to death of the general public. They're scared that someday the general public's going to stand up and say enough is enough.
But it wasn't locked down on the day, because I went downtown, that the nominations came in. But they
that would be wide open.
Down.
Oh, they took the machine right out.
Yeah, so, they took the machine right out. They removed it.
Yeah. We're open here at the city hall, right? Horse's ass, right?
Anyway, I won't keep you, because I know Chris wants to speak about last night, and I would like to hear his comments. But I just want to say, as far as anybody for mayoralty goes in Calgary, nobody has been man enough to stand up.
Well,
they've all been suckered or snooked into giving up their soul or whatever.
Well, that you do. You have to sell your soul. Because you can't do it otherwise. You just can't do it.
Well, I've never sold my soul, so...
well, nor have I, and it's made my life somewhat tough. But that's okay, because I'm looking at the long term, not the short term. And the long term is I want my nation back, and I want my people strong, and I want us to control our futures, not somebody else controlling our futures. And the only way we're going to accomplish that is if we step up to the plate.
Right.
Because,
and we do have to understand what they're teaching the children, and with these shirts. I hope you explain it more, because I know in the audience there was 4 children, one of which is grade 5, and she knew about what they're doing. They're talking to the grade 4s and 5s probably about the residential schools, and she hasn't got a clue. And I think most teachers, we don't have a clue of really what really happened there, other than the elite forcing children into these.
It's no different, Helen, than what they're doing today. And that's when the native lady said to me, we lived through it. Now it's your turn. Nothing could be truer. Okay, your children are being taken from you, no different than the children were taken from the native families. They were taken from the native families to remove the history from the children, to feed them a new history, and this is exactly what's going on in the public schools today. Okay? Everything that was normal is being made abnormal, and everything that is abnormal is being made normal, and that is a form of genocide.
Very strict. Yesterday, what I also noticed and observed and wrote down was by many of the candidates, especially from the university ones and the ones all on the same song page, except for the 2 that I mentioned, Karen Draper and Carla Obetchek or OB.
No, that last name, is she Ukrainian by any chance? She sounds Ukrainian.
She's
I know there's a lot of
mature woman, a very mature woman, and I was impressed with her. Anyway, they pretty well. If you could read in between the lines, they were pretty well saying their children belonged to the state.
Well,
they mentioned it several times.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's written down.
Yeah.
Like the Muslim woman who wrote the paper on. It's called Queering Early Childhood Education, and the Premier of Ontario was in an early school classroom, and so to have the picture of a lesbian in a classroom, who's our Premier, and then the written part was written by this Muslim woman who wrote the paper on queering early childhood education, and also there was another paper about the fact that the state owns the children, right?
Can you here I was, I'm a woman in my 60s. I have a grandmother who came to Alberta in 1907. I had values and ethics and work ethics and Protestant upbringing. My grandmother understood that. Not or couldn't articulate it, but she could feel it and experience it. And I am very disgusted and hurt by our two children, who
I hear that a lot.
Well educated. And can you imagine what the children are going to be like in 10, 15, 20 years?
Oh, it's their basket cases now.
Yes.
Right? Like, I don't know if you heard that, but I was over at Michael Schmidt's place where they have the school, which has got nothing really to do with the public school system, where there's no pavement, there's no cement. It's just beautiful grass and trees, and they get to wrestle and goof around, and they do academics till noon when the kids' heads are sharp, and then after lunch they do plays, and they do more what children like to do, so these kids aren't stuck in a classroom all day. Yeah. And when I was telling these young guys, Michael's son is not 8 and 10 years old, that you can't touch in the schools and that you can't touch anybody and there's no touch policy, they're looking at me like I got my head on crooked. They couldn't believe what I was telling them, and it's totally foreign. But what their school is what the old schools were before the public school system got a hold of the schools, right? They're taught values, they're taught who they are, and in the old days, your grandmother came here in 1907 or whatever. Back in that day, boys were men at the age of 14. Yeah. Now at 35, they're not men yet. Right.
One other story I have to say is that Mayor Nenshi came after me at the U of C.
No doubt.
And there is a gentleman here in town. He's in his 70s, and he observed it, and he was walking out with me. And I think Andre Chabot observed it as well. Or there were a few people that observed it. And if Nenshi was not in, because I approached his sister and said to his sister, what is coming out of his mouth and what he does is incongruent. That's all I said.
Right.
Well, he was furious, in addition to handing out my card and you see why, et cetera, on it, et cetera, and handing it out to some students at the university who perhaps will go and check out the stations and alternative media. Anyway, he was livid, and he had Lawrence not been behind me with his cane. And in the environment that we were in, I am sure he would have definitely done something to me.
Well,
that type of bully he is. And in fact, Lawrence was tweeted to the media, and nobody wanted to pick it up.
Well, it's the same thing, okay? They push this no bullying thing to keep people down when they are the bullies. I've seen Nishi turn like a dog, right? He's always got that great, big, huge, stupid grin on his face. But when confronted, he turns into like a rabid dog, right? And I don't think enough people see that. But it really doesn't matter. That's how these politicians operate. If you challenge them, we're just supposed to lay down, and they're just supposed to keep pushing the program. We're just supposed to stay laid down. But, people just don't go, like you said, the two gentlemen you talked to, people don't even want to go to these meetings, right? They don't want to take an hour or two out of their lives to go to the meeting and sit down and just see how bad this is. I think a lot of them are afraid that if they do see how bad it is, that they might have a twinge that they need to get involved, and they don't want to get involved because they just want to go on their merry, happy little way and pretend everything's okay. But I got a call from Chabot's campaign manager the other day, and
is it the same one or a different one?
No, apparently this is a new one. Because the first one, I was talking to Faye, apparently Chabot thought this guy was a plant from Smith. So they got this new campaign manager, but this guy's a lunatic, absolute idiot. And, I said, like the only time Chabot ever ends up in the news is if he's agreeing with Nenshi.
And right? He does that often.
And I'd had a talk with Chabot about that. Like hold the phone here, boy. What are you doing agreeing with your opponent, right? Yep. And so after talking to the campaign manager, and he's going, "Oh no, we got great numbers in this," and that. I said, "You're not even in the race, right? I mean, they brought Smith in and planted him there to remove Chabot."
Yep.
And you guys ain't doing nothing about that, and you're not going to do anything about it. So, right. I don't want anything to do with this campaign. Nope. So
that's the way I feel too.
Like Faye last night says, well, what do I do? It says like put vote for nobody on my lawn. I said, well, that's an idea. Put your own name on the lawn, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Put a picture of your cat or dog on the lawn. Vote for this, Mm-hmm. But like that. I said it on the show earlier. That lady I talked to when I went to get my coffee today, and I told her that there was a Muslim mayor in Calgary, and she lived in Calgary a long time ago, apparently. And she's going, "What the f? What are you talking to me about? How could there be a Muslim mayor in Calgary? How is that even possible?" And that's the exact same reaction I had when I found out there was a Muslim mayor in Calgary. I almost fell off of my chair. I mean, Calgary was the only real people around Calgary was white people and native people. That was about it.
Right.
And now Helen was talking about building these towers and which is to house the people when they push them in from the cities or bring in more immigrants, and how there's actually areas of Calgary now that are basically slums. There were no slums when I was in Calgary.
Well, there was also mention of removal of Sir John A. Macdonald out there as well.
Oh yeah.
Which, I'm from the town that he ran the country from, and we have a school named after him, and they want to remove his name from the school here. So, like I said, we'll go back to remembering those pictures of people smashing artifacts from Iraq.
Same game.
They first invaded. Well, that's what they're doing here now.
Yep. They are removing the history so they can implant the new history. And the children, after, if that history is removed and a kid goes to school and that history isn't there, then the kid's not going to know about it, and that's what they want. I mean, it goes back, that thing in Austin, Texas, still, it doesn't freak me out so much, it's not unexpected, but this is how it operates. When that reporter went to that Austin University to ask the students what their feelings were about the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Kennedy, not one student he talked to in that university knew that Kennedy had been assassinated.
That's right.
And we're just having a whitewash, like they're just wiping the board clean.
Well, the same thing with, had I not had somebody who brought forth to me the Bolshevik Revolution, where, say 160 billion people dead, Christians, gypsies, a whole bunch of people there, I wouldn't have known about it. We don't hear about the wars. We don't hear about the Civil War in the United States. We don't learn anything about the United States. We don't learn anything about Britain.
We don't learn anything about Canada.
No.
Right? It's
just selected what they wanted.
So we have gone completely away from, there's nothing that makes more sense today than when I remember when I first heard that, because when I left school, it was getting big on the social studies and stuff, And but you know the old saying, right? The 3 R's. And it was back in the past that once you knew how to read, write, and do arithmetic, you were good to go.
Yeah, but
because you had all the tools required. Now you use your own. I know, but the idea of that was then you have the tools that are required. Now you use the tools and your mind, and go out in the world. Now it's here in Ontario they spent, I think it was $60 million on making sure that at least one teacher in each public school knew how to do rudimentary math, because the teachers didn't have a clue how to do the math. Well, how the hell did you become a teacher? Mm-hmm. Well, we know when to tell the children to put on the orange shirt or the green shirt or dress up as a girl. We know all that stuff. That's what we were taught. But as far as the 3 R's are concerned, we don't have a clue.
In junior high, what happened if a teacher was teaching math, they had a telephone system in each room. So one teacher would call another teacher in another room, I understand, in junior high, and ask, well, how does this question, how should I teach this? While she was teaching the classroom.
Yeah, so you have absolutely incompetent teachers teaching children. But there's none of what really matters, being the 3 R's matter. It's about propaganda and normalizing abnormal things into the children, so that the children are malleable. So they're either going to join this little group or that little group. Now, I read somewhere that I don't know if that was in Alberta, Ontario, where that now they have these LGBTQ groups in the schools. In other words, they're indoctrination centers or recruitment centers. Mm-hmm. And if someone outs someone who joined this group, then the one, if somebody says, "Oh, did you hear Dave joined the LGBT group in the school?" If you do that, you're in serious, serious trouble.
In addition to that, they don't have to tell the parents don't have to be told.
No, because the state
they're a member of that group.
The state has made the statement that we own the children, right? And therefore, we don't have to tell the parents anything what we're doing here.
And in 1980, when I graduated from university, a prof said to me and to the class, "You will be the last class that knows how to teach children how to read." Now, a chiropractor here in town who is running for school board for counselor, he called me and thanked me for a couple of things that I did. And he and my website, et cetera, et cetera. And
you have a website. Why don't you shout that out?
Sure. Well, I have my Facebook is powerful. My website is helenmowat.com. HELENMOWAT.com.
Yeah, there's some good stuff on there. There's some stuff on there I'd like you to change, but for the most part, it's a pretty darn good website.
I haven't touched it.
There's a lot of information on there.
Yeah, I haven't touched it for 3-4 years because of the situation, personal situation, and I'll get back to it.
Yep.
But what else? He said that in the United States, a black person can go to university or go to school and not learn how to write a paragraph, not a paragraph, and that person will still go to university.
Absolutely.
Helen?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you, how much latitude as a teacher do you have with your students?
Well, I'm talking about, I used to enjoy, I had lots of latitude in my own classroom, but as soon as they found out that the latitude of daring and giving and creating and imagination and reading and writing and forgetting about the timetable, things like that, then the administration set in and you have no latitude. You're out the door. If you're a good teacher in any way, you're out the door.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's
If you're not dictatorial and a bully and do what the system tells you to do, and use your ego and your position of power to dictate and be a dictator, you're out the door.
Yeah, so, you know, I like when I go over to Michael's school and we spent some time over there, and the kids were so happy and the teachers were so laid back, and it was just marvelous, right? You know, I look at that as we need to start these schools up everywhere. You know, when I talk to Michael's kids Friday night, 8 and 10 years old, and I'm telling them, you know, you can't do a cartwheel in North Bay School anymore. They're just looking at me like you fall off a turnip wagon or something. What the hell are you talking about? Right? It's too totally foreign to these kids. They don't understand that because they're not exposed to it, right? Because they're in a regular old-time school. And I think we need to start pulling kids out of the schools ASAP. You know, I feel so bad for these kids. I really, truly do. I mean, these kids are sitting ducks. Yeah. And if they speak up at all, they're chastised. And, well, your son flicked a freaking ladybug at somebody and ended up in the principal's office, for crying out loud. Like, how's that even possible? You know?
Anyway, I'll improve my website. It was the first website I ever did.
Oh, there's a lot of really good stuff on there.
I will work on that, but I would say give me another year or a year and a half before all my other issues are settled.
Anyways, how's Karen making out? I see she did a live feed on Facebook, and she was holding up some stuff about the UN and then somebody left a comment saying, "Well, I asked one of the something along the line of asked one of the board members about the UN." It's, "Oh no, we ain't got nothing to do with it." And here's Karen holding up the UN agendas, right, from the school board, right? So they're liars and deceivers, folks. You know.
They sure are.
So what ward is a Karen running in?
12 and 14.
At 14?
12 and 14.
12 and 14.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
I mean, there's no way she can hand out flyers or even get to a quarter of almost her population.
Oh, I know. This is the problem because you know, like Karen said to me, she said, you know, I got all these people, and I said I was going to run for school board. So, oh, that's great, we're behind you, but she said, I'm not getting any help from these people, right? I said, well, that's the Canadian deal, right? We're behind you. Don't be behind Karen. Get up beside her, right? Mm-hmm. Being behind something is hiding. Being behind something is not supporting, right? Mm-hmm. You know, don't give it lip service. Get engaged in it. Because it's your children that are being bastardized and harmed. I mean, it's going to take, I don't know how many years it's going to take to undo the harm that was done to these kids. I mean, the university kids are mentally incompetent. They're having mental problems like never seen before because they were never given the opportunity to do anything except follow the rules and have no capacity anymore to deal with life. So, anyways, always good to hear your voice.
Okay, thank you so much, and I'll say bye to Chris, and there's not many minutes left. Okay, thanks.
Take care, Helen, and just keep doing what you're doing, girl. We will wake these clowns up eventually.
Yeah, no, I won't give up.
I won't either. Okay, take care, dear.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks for calling. Bye-bye.
I love that woman.
What's that?
I said I love that woman.
I do too.
I want to marry her. She's still
well, you should.
Huh? Well, I'm a divorcee. Is she divorced? Is she taken?
Her husband passed away a few years.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was just having.
Well, she's had a fight, and she's winning her fights, and because she's tenacious.
She's not quitting.
No, well, she had the problem, and her kids tried to pull any equity out of the house and everything and whatnot, but she had to fight, and this is what's happening to an awful lot of. I don't want to call. I'm certainly not going to call Helen elderly because she's in my age range, And but the family, the kids today just want the money and go have fun with it. They're I remember my aunt and uncle who are still alive, but I remember people complaining that the kids were there divvying up the assets of their parents. And I go, this is pathetic, right?
Still happens.
Yeah, I know it's happening all the time. It's happening more all the time. There's no respect, right? And so I know I know actually more than one person that's not.
There was an article, Ron. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I know a couple of people are giving nothing to their kids. They're going to give it to their grandkids. They're pissed off, right? At the attitude of the kids, right? Like, hurry up and die so I can get your stuff, right? And there's a lot of that going on.
That's there was an article about somebody doing that in an old folks' home.
Yeah.
They got caught on camera saying, "Why don't you just fucking hurry up and die?"
Yeah, so I don't have to come and visit you, and I get the cash.
Yeah, you cocksucker.
Yeah.
No respect for parenthood, eh? None. Work your ass off your whole life. You actually accumulate something.
Right.
Then you end up in the hospital, and your kids can't wait for you to die.
Yeah.
Like, please hurry up.
Yeah. Like, get out of here, and you did give me everything, right? Because I booked some flights and stuff, and I want to go party, right? So hurry up and die. Yeah, it's really pathetic. But no, I hope I'm going to see if I can't get Karen back on the show. She did that little piece, that live feed on Facebook, and she's doing her absolute best. But it's the same old story, right? I mean, she's outnumbered by these Marxists, and she's just a common old girl, and these are union people and heads of churches and this and that that are already well ingrained in the education board, and so she's got an uphill battle ahead of her, but she's going to learn a lot. She's going to come out of it a lot stronger than she went into it, and I don't think she's going to. She hangs out with Helen and that, and Helen's kind of one of her mentors, and she's 30 or whatever, so she's way younger than Helen. So this is really important that we have younger people jumping in here and saying this is wrong. So and she's never had. I don't believe Karen will ever back out or give up. But we need more and more and more and more and more. If we had 10,000 Karens and 10,000 Helens and Fays and that, we could fix this pretty damn fast. But people have to engage, and they don't want to, but they're going to have to. There's going to be a time that they're going to have to engage, whether they like to or not. So that's all good. Anyways, I don't have to do another show till Tuesday night. That's going to be like a holiday. So I want to thank everybody that participates in UCY.tv. I want a special thank you very much to Jules, who's had some tough times medical-wise and that, who just this is tenacious, that she just keeps coming. And she keeps his network up. Yeah, and we've got some really good hosts on this network, and I'm proud to be part of this. I'm proud to be engaged in this fight. And I guess Hal's up in an hour at 3:00. Was behind the woodshed. And what we do need to do is take all these so-called leaders.
I think at 5.
Is he on at 5?
I think so.
Yeah.
I just double check, everybody, but I believe Clint's got a live show at 5.
Yeah, so tune in. There's some good stuff going on here at UCY.tv. We've got some really solid people. So promote the shows, promote the network. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, listeners. Thanks, Kat. Thanks, Helen. And we'll be back Tuesday night, 7 o'clock.
Selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line, lower class and social slime. They don't matter, genocide. Sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. Caesar shit, force of air. Fuck them back, it's only for they want.